Well, switching pace, Islamic financing in Australia has received a boost with news that Crescent Wealth is launching the nation's first Islamic equity fund. The Crescent Australian Equity Fund will start with an initial $5.5 million under management, offering an investment that's managed in accordance with Islamic principles. We're joined in studio by Talal Yassine from Crescent Wealth. Tony Rumble's still with us in studio. But Talal, perhaps you could bring us up to date on the kind of investment principles in which you go by when it comes to Islamic finance.
Absolutely. Islamic finance is, if you want to compare it to something, that's actually an ultra-ethical fund, the way we pitch it. In accordance with Islamic principles, we shy away from any debt-based products, any companies that are in banking, alcohol, pornography, armaments, and some media and leisure. And so we keep away from those and we filter those companies out. So effectively about 40 to 45% of the investment universe is actually we're not allowed to invest in that in Australia.
You feel there's a gap, obviously, in the market, which is why you've tried to move into. What is that gap? What is the potential in Australia you see?
Well, effectively, over the last 20 years, there's nobody I've actually met in the large banks, corporates, law firms or accounting firms who hasn't done something on Islamic finance and tried to access that $1.4 trillion global market, or tried to actually provide a product for people within Australia, which is based on Islamic principles. The gap in the market that we've spotted is that over the 20 years, notwithstanding all the discussions and work, nobody's actually come to market with a product that is not only innovative, an alternative investment form, but also able to access the global markets.
Tony, what about this idea of the socially responsible alternative? Is that something people are seeking out at the moment, given all uncertainty around? Is that something they demand, ask for?
Look, over the last decade or so, it's certainly been on the rise, and in fact there's been some data that shows a pretty good correlation between investors that follow a socially responsible filtering process and our performance. Because I think typically people see that a company that can be overtly managed to be socially responsible is probably a company that's well managed.
Okay, Talal, what about your current weightings? What kind of stocks have you got in the local share market? I saw perhaps an overweighting to material stocks, which we've just been discussing with Tony. That's kind of a hot debate at the moment.
Absolutely, and that's a big issue for us. 40 to 45% of the investment universe is bank or banking, and so that's out. So we're overweighted resources and obviously the commodities, which are effectively accord with Islamic principles for investment. We see perhaps something like One Steel that we've invested in, Rio BHP, suffering a little bit at the moment, but over the medium term I think they'll definitely come back. We're in the equity fund. It's a 3 to 5 year investment period, so we see them bouncing back quite significantly. But also in the fund we invested in companies like the Reject Shop, Kathmandu, etc., who aren't subject to the commodities issue at the moment.
Tony, what about, because I think we were both reading a note by Goldman Sachs, they've just gone underweight some of those very sectors, particularly the material stocks like BHP. What's your sense of the best way to go at the moment?
I love when I hear investors talking about a 3 to 5 year perspective. Yeah. We shouldn't be trading. If you're a long-term investor for your retirement, in fact, what happens to a stock tomorrow is utterly irrelevant. It's the 3 to 5 year view. And I would applaud what Talal was just saying.
Okay, perfect. And just finally, Talal, what's the experience been overseas? Because as you said, we haven't really seen this in Australia. How do you judge? How do you judge the performance of your fund? What are you marking it against?
Well, if I can give you a bit of perspective, we are establishing an institution in Australia. This is one of the first products that we're launching. There are 3 other products to come, and hopefully retail super by the end of first quarter 2012. The experience overseas has been, especially in Asia and in the Middle East, has been a exponential growth. About $1.4 to $1.5 trillion is now in Islamic banking. We see ourselves as doing 2 things: offering products to all Australians that comply with Islamic principles, and secondly, selling the Australian story globally, receiving wholesale mandates and talking to people around the world about what a good story, economic story Australia is, with its fundamentals and its performance.
Fantastic. Talal, thank you there at this point from Crescent Wealth. And Tony, we can pick up maybe on that note with you when we come up after the break as well, selling our investment market to the world. Let's take that break. When we come back also we'll get the opening calls for the local share market and Janine Perrott with her daily rant right now.